Alright, so let's get started with branch number 4. Let's go to the React code and see what changes have been made. If you click on the sign in button, it should lead us to the login page, and the URL also should change. And as you can see, it uses hash-based routing, which is an older form of routing. So yeah, that's about it. Now let's go see on the code side. As you can see on the component, login.js is created, and we also have middleware.js, that's something new. We also have router, React router, that's being imported, and on the render method, you can see we have two routes. The index route goes to the home page, and the login path leads to the login page. And all the routes are wrapped by this router component that takes one single parameter called history. So yeah, this is the code. And React Router is a component-based routing, and the routing library that we are going to look is called reitit. And reitit is completely different from React Router, as you will see very soon. So let's get started with reitit. Reitit is a fast, data-driven router for Clojure and ClojureScript. Now let's look at the data-driven aspect of it. Let's say we have two routes, homepage and login page. Now this is how the routes for homepage and login page looks like. It's just a nested vector. And the first element of the vector is the path. And the second element of the vector is a map that we can give any key value pairs. And the one that we have to give is the view that we want to display. And we have to make sure that we have to wrap it with the var literal, so that it is pointing towards the component and not the value, the vector. And this is especially important when you're doing hardcode reloading and in development time. So yeah, we're going to implement login page, implement add routes, we're going to implement the router state, and we're going to implement routing. Let's get started. So first we're going to create a new branch called routing. Next we will go to the reitit page by Metacin and see how we can use it. So if you go to the example section and go to the front end, let's see. Okay, so on the top we have to import the dependencies, and next we have to declare the pages, and this is the route for this example. It has 3 routes, and inside the init function we have a function called start, and this start function accepts 3 arguments. The first argument is the router, which accepts a route, and here are the routes. It's just a vector, and the first route that we have is, so that's the first route, and that's the path, the name of the route, and the view. And here, this is how you do nested routing in reitit. And you can also give it also supports coercion, right? So you can specify that the path has an ID and it should be an int, or it can have a query parameter and it's an optional, and it's a keyword. And we also have to declare a route state, so that every time the user changes the URL, this routing state gets updated, and which then changes the view. So let's go to the dependency section and add these 3 dependency, the Metacin reitit, Metacin reitit spec, and Metacin reitit frontend. So Metacin reitit is the main routing library, and as you can see we are using 0.5.1111, which is the latest version, and the second library is for coercion and validation, and the reitit frontend is for frontend routing. Once we have done that, we have to restart our server, and we need to require all these dependencies in our app.core namespace. Once we have installed the dependency, we are going to create a dummy version of login page. For now, we'll just display, let's say, login page. We will implement this very shortly. Next, let's copy the routes from this example and let's paste it in our example. And let's also quickly refactor it to meet our needs. So we will have two routes for now, the home route and the login route. So there you go. We have implemented our routes, right? Right, so next, what are we going to do next? What are the steps that we need to do next? Once we have defined our routes, the next step is to define So next we are going to write a function called router start that starts the router. So this function will not take anything, and as you can see from the example, the start function takes 3 arguments, right? The router, the match state that calls every time the user changes the route, and an optional use fragment is set to 2. We will see that what it does very shortly. So let's declare a route state on top of the file, and it's going to be a reagent atom, and it'll be set to nil. And instead of match, we will replace it with route state. Finally, we are going to call this function in the main body of the main function so that the router starts when we start the page. So let's go ahead and refresh the page, and let's go to our let's go and inspect what's happening inside the route state. So if you dereference the route state, it should be route state, sorry, not router. And if you evaluate this, you should see something, and here you go. This is what you wanted, and it's basically a map with lots of key value pairs. And inside this map we have a key called data, and inside this data we have all the route information, such as the name of the route, the view. And so this is how we will use to display the view. So let's thread over. Let's use the thread operator on route state and just explore what's inside this state. So on the template will give us the path, and let's go and see what's inside the data key. So this is going to return us a map, and inside this map we have 3 properties: the coercion, the name, and the view. So what we need is the view, right? And this is going to return us the component itself. Cool. Now, instead of showing the home page directly, what we want is we want to get the view out of the router state, and we want to display the current view. So we're going to name it current view, and instead of the home page, we'll show current view. Perfect. Now, if you refresh the page, if you go to login page, since this is a hash-based routing, we have to use hash. So the login page works. Now, if you don't want to use the hash-based routing, you have to make some changes on your route start function. So instead of using use fragment to true, you have to use fragment to false. So with this, you will be able to use history API, and now you won't need hash basically. So if you refresh, you should see a login page. And if you if you go back, it should go back to the home page and login page. So everything works for now. Cool. By the way, inside the router function, we have this option called data coercion, and it says RSS coercion. This is what makes coercion possible. Right. Also, let's rename our match to match route, M to match route. Okay, now that we have implemented routing, what we need to do is we need to implement the navigation. And before we do that, let's look at this function called href, which is exposed by React Frontend Easy. And this href accepts the name of the route, and it returns a path. So we can use this inside an anchor tag, right? So it generates a string. So what this does is it takes route name and it generates the route path. If the route path does not exist, then it returns nil. Next, we'll look at how we can implement the header component, the two nav links. So as you can see on the React page, we are using the link component from React Router. However, on the Reddit, we don't have React Router, so we're going to use the href function that we just saw. So on the anchor tag, we have to give a property href to the anchor, and we will just copy the function that we just looked at, right? And we will give it, there you go. And this should be home. Okay, now if you click on home, it should go to home page. Now the login page and home page, the process is pretty repetitive. Let's also implement that. Next, we're going to implement the login and the home link. Perfect. So as you can see, our navigation works. Wonderful. Okay, so the next step is to implement this login component, right? Again, this is very repetitive, nothing really complicated about it. It's just a component. So I wanted to show you an example. So this is the reason why you have to put the var literal, because as you just saw, if you try to, now the hardcode reloading works. So this is the reason why you have to add the var literal. Because if you try to save, if you don't add it, and if you try to save, the hardcode reloading won't work. So this is the reason why. Okay, now let's quickly go ahead and implement the sign-in page. And we'll also give a function called onSubmit, so that when you click on sign in, it calls that function. So if you open the inspector and go to console, and if you click on sign in, we should see login being logged. So as you can see, the login page is completed. It took us only 13 lines of code. The React code, as you can see, is like almost 60 lines of code. So yeah. And that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and in the next video we will be implementing the login page, the functionality, but before we do that, let's quickly refactor the login page so to make it even more terse. Okay, and now it's only 11 lines of code. and if you refresh, it should still work. Awesome. Alright, so see you on the next video.